Welcome to this edition of The Advance. Glad to have you with us as we kick off this first called session, this first special session of the Texas Legislature. Here in the corner of the screen, you are seeing House Speaker Dustin Burrows gaveling in the Texas House. We've also got a stream from the Senate floor. But I am sitting here with Brandon Waltons, who is, of course, managing editor of Texas Scorecard. Brandon, walk us through what's going on today.
Well, I mean, today's the first day of this 30-day special session that Governor Greg Abbott has called. In fact, we've known about this for, over a month now. The governor, on that veto deadline, when he was signing and vetoing bills, he said, don't get too comfortable. You're going to come back July 21st. And so here we are now. And we've got an 18-item agenda that spans a lot of issues that range from conservative priorities that have been priorities, I think, that Republicans have pushed for a long time. We'll talk about some of those, but as well as some that are in response to the flooding that we saw, of course, a couple of weeks ago in the Hill Country in Central Texas. And so you have both of those issues at play, but the biggest one is no doubt congressional redistricting. That's the one that's getting a lot of attention. That's the one that Democrats are saying that they could potentially leave town over. They could potentially break quorum. And so that's what a lot of the questions and a lot of the focus is going to be, I think, on, especially in these first few days and in the first week or so.
Before we talk about redistricting, Brandon, I want to talk about this call on taxpayer-funded lobbying. It seems the governor is kind of merging an end to taxpayer-funded lobbying with property tax relief, with local government spending restraint.
Yes.
Those are three big, dare I say, Herculean efforts that we have seen at various times, various lawmakers in regular sessions and in some special sessions in the past try to push through with zero success.
Oh, yes. I mean, we have seen, it is rare to see, if people have watched the legislature for any amount of time, they'll know it's very rare to see a bill get voted down in the House. And yet back in 2019, you had the House actually voting down a bill to end taxpayer-funded lobbying. And this session, the bill didn't even get a vote in committee, didn't even get a committee hearing in the House. Actually,
in fact, Ken King said, no, I'm not going to give you a committee. I'm not going to allow the bill to move forward.
Exactly. Ken King, who
is still the
chairs
chairman,
the House State Affairs Committee, reportedly told lawmakers, look, we're not even going to hear this. And in fact, he didn't. So he didn't give it a committee hearing. That comes after the fact that the Senate passed a version of a taxpayer-funded lobbying ban. But I will add that their version was watered down pretty heavily on the floor, because while it said that local governments couldn't hire individual lobbyists to represent them, it took out any provisions that would have tamped down on lobbying organizations. So think of groups like the Texas Association of School Boards, Texas Association of Counties, things like that, which actually make up probably the lion's share of taxpayer-funded lobbying, or at least the efforts that we've seen in the Capitol. And so interesting to note that in his call, in the language that Governor Abbott put on this call, he's asked lawmakers not just to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, but has specifically called out stopping those lobbying organizations like TASB.
Okay, so the thing that's gotten the most attention, what's gotten the most attention is the possibility of Democrats busting quorum. What has the issue that has sparked that, though, is congressional redistricting.
Yes.
President Trump has said he wants maybe as many as 5 new Republican districts to come out of Texas ahead of the 2026 election. So these are changing congressional lines to take effect for this upcoming 2026 election, which has what folks in Washington tell me is you've got members of Congress kind of spooked about how does this impact them, because it's not as easy as just changing 5 districts lines. Those 5 districts all touch 2, 3, 4 districts that touch 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 districts and kind of spill out around the state.
Sure. And when President Trump came out and said he wanted to see 5 new Republican congressional seats, certainly an ambitious task. However, we've already started to see some proposals, some suggestions of what these maps could potentially look like. And to your point, you make a change in one district, it definitely has some ripple effects across other districts. At the same time, there are some districts in Texas that will say are already potentially, according to the Department of Justice, unconstitutional
Right.
because of the fact, and we're talking about Democrat districts, these coalition minority districts
Well,
that
so-
are drawn in a way that is potentially illegal already.
Yeah, so let's explain this real quick, just because these are the kind of things, the very nerdy things that are really matter. This is why you're seeing the Democrats national Democrats putting up a big stink about this, why Texas Democrats put a big stink. So you had a Galveston County redistricting. This is where all this is based on, is a Galveston County redistricting for their commissioner court seats. And the county commissioners, Republican court, said, wait a second, we're having to draw these lines around these coalition districts where, you can understand I can understand the rationale. I can understand the rationale that says, look, you've got a minority population, but with gerrymandering done in the past, you would dilute the ability of African Americans or Hispanics, Asians, whoever, to have a voice. You kind of, you chop up their neighborhoods in a way. That's kind of the theory behind the Voting Rights Act and other things. So you can kind of understand this idea of making sure there's at least a district where Hispanics or African Americans or whoever can elect a candidate of their choice. But these coalition districts, though, are just bald-faced Democrat gerrymandering, but not calling it that, because they presume that everyone with black skin, everyone with brown skin, everyone who isn't melanin challenged, melatonin deficient, is going to vote Democrat. Right. And you had the laughable position taken by the opponents in this Galveston case that Robin Armstrong, an African-American doctor from Galveston, shouldn't be counted as black because he voted Republican.
Right.
I mean, absolutely mind-numbing kind of stuff. So the Supreme Court finally came down on this Galveston and said, yeah, these coalition districts are wrong. Pitting together people under the guise of a racial of their racial background, to use it as a metric for voting that's abhorrent. That's wrong. And so we see that. So that's what's at stake here.
Yeah.
We have a number of these congressional districts designed to produce Democrats doing so using this weird minority racial preference stuff. So the Democrats are upset because you get rid of that. Suddenly, you get rid of up to 5, maybe even more, when you include other states, congressional districts. And that's a huge blow to the way the Democrats have been able to hold on to power.
Exactly. And so this is no doubt why you've seen, even this morning, Democrats held a press conference where they were talking about they're keeping all options on the table, including breaking quorum, including leaving, like they did in 2021, just 4 years ago, like they did 20 years before that, when similar redistricting issues were on the table. So there's certainly a lot of talk about that. That's probably what's been dominating the discussion right now around the special session. And they're not really giving a straight answer. It's not really clear. Now, they've shown up today, and Gene Wu, who's the caucus chairman for the House Democrats, said they'd show up today. They want to see what happens, see what committees meet first, what bills start moving first, but they could potentially leave.
Yeah, and for folks, just so folks on reasonable expectations, the first day of a special session is just that. No legislation is on the floor today, but yet some of these bills are things Democrats want. The history has been that the Democrats have seen is just don't show up on the House floor. You had members of the Democrat caucus who were in the Capitol a couple of years ago, but they weren't on the floor, so they were able to bust caucus simply by just sitting in their office, with no repercussions. Now, of course, big groups flew to Washington, D.C. Yet in the past, they went to Oklahoma and to Mexico and other goofy things. They're all kind of living off the idea that Governor Abbott and House Speaker Dustin Burrows aren't going to enforce any sort of constitutional prohibitions against quorum busting. And this is going to be a real challenge, I think, for Speaker Burrows.
I think it'll be very interesting.
Beginning with Speaker Burrows.
Yeah, beginning with him. Certainly, there's others involved as well. Right now, both Governor Abbott and Speaker Burrows sort of keeping tight-lipped about this. In fact, the only thing you can really see that's potentially different this time is that the House rules have been written in such a way that members who break quorum could be subject to a $500 a day fine. Now, the other side of that is that this isn't just a Texas issue or something that Texas lawmakers are interested in. This is something that national Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries was speaking about this with the Texas Democrat congressional delegation last week, sort of urging Democrats to at least consider breaking quorum there. And so when you see that kind of attention, you realize what's at stake. I'm not sure that a $500 a day fine is enough to combat the potentially millions of dollars that Democrats may be willing to spend on this effort. We'll just have to see.
Well, and I think when you sit there and you look at the with the Democrats, you got guys, George Soros and kind of the boogeymen with cash, who might well be willing. Okay, the Texas House has just adjourned until Thursday, so they're not planning on, I guess, doing any floor business till Thursday. But the Democrats, as you said, how much would they spend? You think in the midterm election, the minority party often does better than the majority party. The party who doesn't have the presidency tends to, people can play off of dissatisfaction. But it's never 5 seats, 10 seats, those kind of numbers. So this does kind of represent a real existential threat to the Democrats. And I think to your point, Brandon, that question of how much would, the Hollywood left, George Soros, the tech bros, how much would they spend to not only to keep the possibility of a Democrat majority in 2026 by stopping redistricting? That's a lot of money they're going to be willing to spend.
Exactly. And I do want to mention, though, before we wrap up, though, there are other issues on this. Well, we talked about taxpayer-funded lobbying. But you also have women's privacy. I think is interesting that we're seeing that on there, keeping men out of women's spaces, like bathrooms and locker rooms. And if that issue sounds familiar, well, it's because 8 years ago, I think 2017, this was the issue that was at the heart of a special session back then. You had Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and then Speaker Joe Strauss, we're going all the way back to then, that were fighting over this issue. Ultimately, it didn't pass out of that special session, and it's really telling that here we are nearly a decade later and this issue hasn't gotten done. There's also some issues that are going to require some money, and that's, I think, going to be a big center of debate, because you already have Acting Comptroller Kelly Hancock coming out today with a updated revenue estimate showing that for this special session the legislature will have about $3 billion to use, right? You combine that with potentially looks like upwards of $13 billion depending on how exactly it's allocated, coming from the federal government as part of the big, beautiful bill to reimburse Texas for its border security efforts over the last 5 years. You combine those two, so you're looking at potentially the state will have $16 billion. There's people that want to see more money given towards flood prevention, different water projects. And then there's another side, particularly we've seen this from some conservative lawmakers already today, that say we want to see this being put towards meaningful property tax relief. This is an issue that the legislature touched on during the regular session, using their estimates about $10 billion in property tax relief, which is short of what even they were able to do 2 years prior to that. An additional $16 billion certainly would go a long way towards helping out Texans' pocketbooks.
All this seems to indicate, Brandon, that the next 29 days remaining in the special session, there's probably going to be a lot of writing from you and the rest of the scorecard writing team.
Certainly.
All right. Hey, you can go to texasscorecard.com. Of course, continue to follow Brandon and the rest of the team. They're on X and Facebook and all the other places. Brandon's big on TikTok, of course. And there you can keep up with what's happening day in and day out of the special session. We will be back next Monday at noon for the advance. Until then, have a great week.
Okay. Hey.